Call to order this meeting of the Issaquah School Board. Today is Thursday, October 12th. At this point, would everyone join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? Thank you. At this point, we have an opportunity for public comment. There was no one signed up for public comment in the room. Is that correct? And is there anyone online? Thank you. Okay, with that, we will move forward with the next agenda item, which is the approval of the consent agenda.
I move the consent agenda be approved as presented.
Second.
Thank you. Consent agenda is a meeting management tool whereby the board is able to pass multiple items with one motion. With that, we will vote. All those in favor? Aye. Any against? Thank you. That passes. Superintendent, are there any changes to the regular agenda?
There are no changes to the regular agenda.
Thank you. Our first regular agenda item is a recap of the board work study, which occurred just prior to this session. It was focused on executive limitation 11, discipline, and it was a very good discussion around the culture of expectation setting in our schools. This is an opportunity for the board to share any learnings or insights from that session. Who would like to get us started?
I appreciated hearing from the principals about how they implement tier 1 and tier 2 supports. It's nice to sometimes hear from the people on the ground as opposed to, not that I don't love admin and cabinet, but it's nice to hear from the people on the ground. And I also appreciated hearing from our student rep about her experiences at Issaquah High.
I appreciated hearing our 1.2% number, which is that in total, only 1.2% of students in our entire district had any type of exclusionary action, which I think is to be celebrated. That is a small number, but I did appreciate hearing, as Director Weaver said, about all the work that's being done on the different tiers. You know, the concept of the tier 1 being kind of the learnings that all kids need around behaviors and interactions and how they operate in school. And that, you know, tier 2 is for a smaller group that has struggles with it. And tier 3 is for an even smaller group. And hopefully that leads us to success and keeps kids from being excluded from school.
I'll just say I apologize that I missed half the discussion. I was at a riveting middle school volleyball game. But I did have a couple questions that I wanted to elevate for additional data. I think it'd be helpful. One, I want to reinforce what Director Moore just said. Like, that should be celebrated. 1.2% of exclusionary discipline is fantastic. I think for me, the question I want to know is, by secondary building for each of our middle and each of our high school, do we see disproportionality in every one of our buildings? And the reason why, because for me, it's all about directing resources to support buildings where they need it. And so it's hard for me to know. I know there's been so many conversations we're having about how do we direct resources to make sure we're supporting buildings and students. And then the other part I really want to know is, can we tie this high school discipline data to, I would like to know their outcomes. Meaning, is this really, are these externalizing behaviors that we have the opportunity to say, like, wow, the student actually is acting out because they are struggling in XYZ coursework. So I'd really like to know, what is their 9th grade success rate and what is their graduation rate, on-time graduation rate for this high school population. So if you can identify it down to know their subgroup, then you must be able to know what their academic data is. And so I think it would be great for us to be able to blend their disciplinary data, because it's not really as outcome measure for me as early warning detection system, and to see what other supports are we driving or not driving for their success. And so I don't know if that's possible, but that would be something that would be really helpful for me to put it all together especially under this whole MTSS where we're trying to blend everything, these tiered supports. And that would be a really good thing, I think, to help us to be able to do that in a more holistic fashion.
Can I clarify the data request? I think I heard you say that you were interested in seeing the discipline data by building and by demographic groups. Is that correct? Okay, number one. And then number two is to see what the additional markers are for academic progress related to ninth grade on track and high school graduation for those who have received a suspension. Okay, thank you.
Yep. And looking back, I mean, obviously not the ones that are in this current year, there wouldn't be, but it would be, you have to
There's
start
multiple
looking
years.
back at like
Yes.
3 or 4 years ago. And I know COVID will make it distorted. So maybe you don't want to start that. Maybe even if you just started with ninth grade success rates for the last 2 years,
Yep.
because I think COVID would be unhelpful because we saw what happened to our discipline rates then.
Correct. It's a very
And then
big
maybe we could track the high school one 4 years from now or 2 years from now.
Great. And I see many nods across the board that's of interest as well. So I appreciate the clarification, just making sure I heard that. And some of that might take longer, some of it might take, less long, but we will take that
Yeah.
under consideration. Thank you.
And then for buildings, it was just secondary buildings. It wasn't all buildings.
Yes, I heard middle school and high school, which was your secondary comment. Just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
I think for me, there were a few things when I really appreciated a conversation of how parents are involved in the process. And that even if it's a tier 1 situation, that they're contacted. And so I guess for me, that's a really important piece, is that parents are at the heart of disciplining with a student. They have to know if their student's struggling with discipline in the building. If they don't know about it, then you don't have that reinforcement of the appropriate behaviors back at home. So I think that it's at the heart of anything that we're doing in the schools, is how does that get reinforced back home? I think for me, one of my concerns is that by, what comes to the board is going to be in school and out of school suspensions. And with the way things are tiered, we're not going to really know what's going on in the schools. So if certain behaviors that used to be a 90-day expulsion is now a tier 1 issue, how do we as a board ever know what's really happening in our school? So if we hear, oh, these things are happening, and then I look at the data and go, we've only had 2 suspensions all year about that. It doesn't seem like, oh, there's an issue at the school. So how do we as a board, what information now is going to come to us? Do we need to know by tier what those levels are rather than just in school suspension, out of school suspension? So I might be more interested in knowing kind of the similar, what are the behaviors, and then what are the tier levels of incidents that we've seen in there. So, and especially around things that are going to be ongoing problems. And I really look at addiction is something that can impact an ability for a student to succeed long-term. So if we are seeing signs of addiction to some type of chemical, some type of substance, whether it's alcohol, cannabis, or tobacco or something more, what are we doing to support that student? Because even if the first time they're caught, if they're doing it in school, it's already a problem. So how are we supporting students and really getting more than here's a 20-minute video to watch? Because at that point, they already need more help than that.
Thank you for those. I think for me, what I thought was really helpful is hearing the expectation setting processes along the different levels and how that changes with the maturity or age of the students, and the fact that there's multiple opportunities to share expectations of behavior within the buildings, within writing in the student code of conduct to remind people of those things they have signed as well. And it just the creative ways of reminding of what the expectations are in the building, as well as ensuring that new joiners to the school have that same opportunity to be prepared and to be successful. So I appreciate these additional data requests as we keep looking at it, but I think it is an important thing to know that such a small amount of our students are being excluded from their learning opportunity. Even in that case, that there's still supports in many cases to do that inside the building where they can still get support. So I think it was a great conversation. Superintendent, anything you'd like to add?
First and foremost, I want to just thank our team led by Dr. Dana Bailey in facilitating and preparing for the work study and in partnership with Sherry Cox, Susan Mendel, Melinda Reinvan, Elena Sividasan, and Shireen Carver, and in particular for Naomi Wu, our student representative to the board, for sharing her perspective, as well as our principals, Principal Tim Baines, Principal Julia Kleinkoff, not Julia, I mixed up the two. Yes, Tia Kleinkoff, Principal Aaron Connolly, and Principal Catherine Coffin. So it was very helpful to have those voices around the table. And I always learn something a little bit new as well when I hear folks have a discussion on the matter. So thank you very much. And, I think discipline is a manifestation of lots of different potential root causes, both in school and potentially from out of school. And so we do work very hard to ensure that we uncover the root cause for each and every student that might be experiencing something that leads them to act in ways that are not in accordance with our expectations.
Thank you. Unless there's any additional comments on the work study, then we'll move on to the next agenda item, which Superintendent, over to you for works in progress.
Great, thank you. So a couple of things of just tying on to what I've shared last time around what I've been up to personally in my role. As of last Friday, I've been able to get to all sites for program schools and operations, and have actually started my next round of informal visits, which started this week at Maple Hills for Arrival and also a fantastic PE class. And so I've been digging in more into physical education this year and just seeing some amazing work that our teachers are doing to ensure that there's collaboration, there's teamwork, there's new physical skills, there's problem solving skills that are all being taught in a very short amount of time. This week, I've also continued, and you'll hear a little bit more about our overall secondary education work in a bit, but was able to meet with Julia Bamba, who joined me for a meeting with Michelle Rhee, who's the former Washington, D.C. Public Schools Chancellor, in her venture to connect K-12 learning, apprenticeship, and ed tech to foster earn and work readiness for high schoolers upon graduation. And as we consider secondary innovation, we want to make sure that we are learning about all the ways industry is looking for solutions, support, and partnership from K-12 education. On a fun note, over the weekend, Salmon Days was an amazing event with a lot of energy and people in downtown Issaquah this past weekend. And congratulations to the Issaquah, Greater Issaquah Chamber of Commerce team for their leadership in this community event, and to many of our staff, student, and families for their contributions as well as participation. I ran into several parents and family members and actually staff members during my volunteer shift, and got to enjoy some shopping as well after my volunteer shift. So it went from literally nighttime with a headlamp to daytime with lots of people and all of us looking a little bit like we'd just woken up. So some other key district and strategic plan updates I'd like to share. It is time for, flu season and COVID shots and all those sort of things that come along with the fall. So yesterday, Rite Aid did offer vaccinations here on site for a variety of different immunizations, and the district admin office building, was able to have 80 of our staff members access this. And I want to thank Rite Aid as well as Laura Carmichael for her facilitation of that as the director of our health services. It's also been great seeing so many more families and community members involved in our schools in person and on site. And this volunteerism, I think, is such a huge part of what provides the extra resources and support, both for our staff and our students. And in particular, one data point I asked Elena Sividasan for was around our voice mentor numbers for this year compared to last year. And already we are at about over 280 this year compared to last year around this time, which was around 175. So that's a well above and beyond. And we're actually probably on track to significantly exceed last year's mark at the end of the year, which was just over 300. So that's some really great news. And I encourage those who are listening to continue to use your time and your talent to support our schools in many ways. I also want to provide an ongoing update about the breakfast program, which I have done in these works in progress before. And the Issaquah Valley Elementary Breakfast Program launched yesterday, and that did include a hot item. 26 students were served yesterday, and there were 32 served this morning. So there's a small uptick in increase, and I expect with the continued offerings there that will only increase over time. By the end of this month, breakfast program will expand to Sunset Elementary School. And a huge thank you to Jason Morse and Brian Olson, who's in charge of our nutrition services, for leading this effort. Not finally, but one last note I'd like to share, and this does touch upon Director Gallange's comment around directing resources to where there are high needs in our district or needs that we've identified that are a priority. We are continuing to advance our work in priority area 5 of our strategic plan, which is organizational effectiveness. And the strategy there is to develop an equity-based budgeting model. And we are in conversations with districts and facilitators who've both developed and implemented this type of budgeting approach to ensure alignment of funding areas for students with highest need, and specifically how that is also communicated and transparently and authentically done in partnership with many others. So in that vein, in September, an internal work group formed and met with representation of principals from each level, school executives, those that represent the various supports for our students through special services, and then student information, family partnership, and other types of work employees who support our students. And that was an incredible kickoff. It was quite a large group. And the initial results from this internal work group focused on areas of highest need, specifically a lot of work, or a lot of needs that were identified specifically on social emotional support, as well as early intervention and supports at the elementary level. And I want to thank Mariah Banasek, Executive Director of Finance and Budget, for leading that work forward. So one final thing from me is around just some key reminders for the community. Athletics are in full swing, and we have home games that draw a lot of attention and attendance. And so we just want to remind families that it's important to ensure that if you have a young child who's not high school age, that it's important to maintain supervision and attendance yourself. Student safety is a top priority at these events, and we do need help continuing to make sure that that is a space that is enjoyed and fun and safe for all. So many parents are already doing this already. Thank you so much. And we just want to make sure that people are reminded that we really need family partnership to make sure that all students and attendees are safe.
Thank you. With that, we can move to our next agenda item, which is secondary innovation. I believe, yes, we have folks joining us at the podium. Superintendent, if you want to get us started on this topic.
Yes, I will kick us off in this conversation as Julie Bamba, who will restate her name and role and charge this year, joins us at the podium. Really, this is about continuing our conversation. We've been talking about secondary innovation in many ways in board discussion and board work groups, in my own works in progress. And this is an opportunity for us to continue to advance that work in a more formal way and establish a foundation for change and innovation as we consider the work that needs to be done. And so just very grateful for Julie Bamba for joining the district team this year to be able to help us wrangle that work, bring cohesion to it, and continue to do the kind of research that's necessary and have that thought time and space to be able to engage deeply with as many people as possible. So I'll pass it over to you, Julia.
Hello. Okay, perfect. Dawn? Hello, thank you. Okay, so thank you again, Superintendent Tawagic, Board President Mullings, and Board of Directors for inviting me here this evening to present to you about secondary innovation and the work moving ahead in the Issaquah School District with this. My name is Julia Bamba, and I'm currently the principal on special assignment leading secondary innovation in the Issaquah School District. The purpose of tonight's presentation is to set the foundation for a need for innovation and change in our school district. I'd like to share a few examples of secondary innovation just to start future conversations for us. I want to preview a framework that we'll be using to engage the community in future design, and then also just share a few initial steps around moving forward with this. I'm actually really excited to launch this conversation this evening. I've been waiting for several months and starting this position to just start to share a spark. And with that, the hope is that we can just start to launch these conversations because we have some incredible possibilities in our school district as we move through this work. I took a couple core values of innovation, creativity, collaboration, and equity, and aligned that next to our new ISD vision that really facilitates students' passions and potential to positively impact the world. So this statement is really guiding me and our innovation connected to our board, to our new district vision as well. So I believe that the district is ready for change and innovation. We already have incredible and excellent schools and programs in our district, and we can continue to build and grow on these as we go. We have strong student experiences, perspectives, and opinions and desires on what change can happen in the district. We have very strong partnerships with family and community members. We have smart and passionate educators that are currently working in our building, focusing on student growth and learning. And we are home to, I have to say it, Gibson Neck High School, who is a national leader in innovation already. And I actually would just like to take a moment to spotlight Gibson Neck High School because it's really important for us to know about the work and growth that's happened over time. So with the support for the last 8 years from our school district and the board, we have now grown and developed into a model of innovation and excellence and a national leader in transforming educational experiences for students. Just last year, we hosted close to 100 visitors who came to our campus from across the nation and some visitors from worldwide just to see what is the rich and rigorous and engaging learning environment look like at our school. We also host several panels and are invited to a lot of convenings to share our model and our learning because we have grown over 8 years. It's important for us to take this time to celebrate and recognize this work that's happening in our own district and find ways to expand these opportunities to more students. So we know the world has changed and it's continuing to change, and we want to create learning environments to provide human connection, connections to real world and solving real world problems, a personalized approach to learning that's connected to students' future aspirations. We should have courses that align with current and emerging pathways. We can't miss the integration of technology and, of course, AI with a human-centered approach. And we should rethink how we can best align our practices and our resources to time, place, and how students learn. The Carnegie Foundation established the Carnegie Unit in 1906. And that connected learning to time, age, and content. And at that time, it was a transformative development. Now, just 100 years later, it's not the only way to meet the needs of all of our students. And last spring, the Carnegie Foundation launched a partnership with ETS. And ETS is the largest private educational testing organization in the world. This partnership also includes XQ Super School, who is an education leader that's dedicated to reimagining what high school experience can be. This partnership aims to rethink how knowledge and skills and dispositions are acquired and measured, and how those connect to the future success and learning of our students. So on a recent podcast, Getting Smart podcast, it featured Tim Knowles, who's the president of the Carnegie Foundation, and Amit Savak, who is the CEO of ETS. And on that podcast, Amit highlighted the work of the Mastery Transcript Consortium, and sharing that that's an organization who's a leader in rethinking education and looking beyond what a traditional transcript can say about our students' learning and what their potential is. So I share this just as another example of how Issaquah School District has already been leading the way in this work. Gibson Neck was the first public high school to join the Mastery Transcript, and we were one of 5 pilot schools who piloted the transcript in 2020. So we continue to use the Mastery Transcript. We continue to be a leader in the organization in this work. And again, we need to continue to look that students can enter college and university without grades and credits, and that the Issaquah School District is a strong leader in this work, and we will continue to be as we move ahead. So we see sparks of innovation everywhere. And we have already established some strong partnerships with innovators in education. So we have, as I just shared, the amazing partnership with the Mastery Transcript Consortium. We've applied with Digital Promise to join the League of Innovative Schools, and they focus on research and how future of education is connected to technology. And then in just a little bit, I will share about a partnership that we have with Cambiar Education to engage with our community and serve as a case study for innovation. So we will begin this process by co-designing with our community and keeping co-design at the core of our process. So we know that schools that are leaders and have successful models have co-designed with their community. And additionally, they have several of these design principles that are part of their model that we need to consider these in our work as we move ahead. So I've gathered several different school models that I'd like to share, and just kind of thinking about time right now, I'll just click through these and then we'll offer up if you have any questions rather than going through each of these individually. So we have Gibson Eck, Tesla STEM High School, which are our neighbors in the Lake Washington School District. An awesome partnership between Sammy Soda and IDEA, who are in the Tacoma Public Schools. Then we have High Tech High, Iowa Big, and then another network, the CAPS network. So just maybe pause there for a minute if you had a chance to look through, if you had any just initial reactions or questions about any of these school models, and then we'll keep going. So we know that innovation does take a community, and I'm really excited for us to start this engagement process with our community. So as we move through this process, we will be using the CREATE framework, which was designed by Cambiar Education with some inspiration from Stanford's design thinking model. This aligns really well with our work already in process because it is about grounding our work in research and then connecting with our community through empathy interviews and doing some co-design work. So I have a few
Julia,
discussions.
I do have a question.
Yeah, great.
And we had this, at least the examples earlier, but I guess as you just went forward, I wondered, there are great examples. Obviously, they're in different locations, but how are you taking in this information? So is the goal of just saying there's many examples of different ways to do this, or is there something specific in these examples that particularly stands out to you or that you want us to take note of?
Yeah. So if I think about the school models that I've provided here, they are all a little different in just some are small, some are larger networks, some work alongside comprehensive high schools. And so while I'm taking in the information and while we start doing the code design work and start assembling a team, working and doing empathy interviews with students and parents and families and community members, is we're looking for themes that may carry throughout schools. One thing I know is that the schools that I visited over the years or that we continue to connect with and view is at the core of their work is around relationships and strong connections with students and giving students voice. And then we have design principles that layer around those, where project-based learning. The Tacoma schools are all about place-based learning and getting students in the community, partnering with community partnerships or parks that can be really inspiring. So I think when we launch into the work, it's really important we can learn from all of these other models and use those as inspiration. And what it does is help to open up our ideas here on what is possible so that we're not so restricted. And so as we go, we can learn what might work here. What is a need that we have? What are other schools doing this? And then how can we bring it to our work?
I will add that sometimes there's an approach where we say, this is the thing. It is a hyper focus on one particular approach, or it's about, being place-based, or it's about part-time at school and part-time off campus, or it's about something else. And so what we want to not do is fall into the idea of just the tactical thing and actually get to the core of what we really want to be true, and then figure out what the then frame and actual structure would look to make that happen here. Because oftentimes, and I've worked in transformation and innovation roles in the past. And so literally sometimes you just say, oh, that's the thing we want to do. We want to create a school that's just like this. We want to create an all virtual school that's based on apprenticeship models. And again, we want to sort of make sure we surface through our process what the real need is, and how to bake that into the values and the approach that we take for student learning, and then figure out the right structure that works for us.
And so I do have a couple of discussion questions that are up here. So just take a moment if you want to share ideas or ask more questions, and then we can move ahead to what a few of the next steps are.
I was gonna, I'm sorry, are we ready to go? Oh, I was just gonna ask, I know one of the things you talked about were, I don't know if you called them empathy interviews, or how do you plan to engage with the community?
So I think that's part of the planning that we're doing right now to be able to begin to launch our co-designing and our interviews and working with the community in 2024. So some of those examples, so we're working with Combier Education, for example, to go through empathy interview training with the goal of then starting to do those one-on-one interviews with students and families and partners and teachers in the area. So that's one example. So right now it's like sharing this vision right now, hearing from you, because this is not the first time you'll get to hear from me this year, because we're going to start this path into looking at what that is and getting to what those specifics might be.
I will add that we'll include other methods that we have started to, utilize over the past few years in particular to gather input, and especially at key moments. So both broad, but also key moments to test certain ideas. So that would be an ongoing, regular part of our work. It's not, it would be building upon that work that we've done in the past, both for strategic plan, which you all did also with the superintendent search. So building on all those methods and tools that we have. But then the important thing for us is making sure that we come back and share what we have learned at this key moment in time, right? To continue to offer more feedback as well along the way.
Director Gallinger.
I'm really passionate about this work to reimagine high school in our school district across our district. So as you go through and do these community conversations with students and families and industry, I would really like that you keep us in the loop so we can participate and just be there to listen. It's really a convening of really important conversations that I think it's critical to be able to hear them. So that would be my request.
Thank you. So I presume that as we engage with industry, it's sort of a two-pronged question. It's what kind of output do you need from our high schools? And conversely, what can you provide to us to help us create that? Are we looking at a two-way street that way?
Yeah, absolutely.
There are, I've shared before, Director Gallinger and I were able to join as well as Julia with the Greater Issaquah Chamber of Commerce. So we are hearing more, and we're doing more outreach as well to understand the needs of our employers. The Washington Roundtable has a publication that talks about what's necessary for the workforce, and that's a membership group that represents all of the large companies in the state of Washington. So we know that, and we hear informally also on the news, all the different areas where there are staffing shortages and critical areas around the state. Obviously we talk a lot about technology and AI, but we still have things that get done in person. We need to make things, we need to build things, and we need to, operate a world where humans live, not operate humans. That is to AI, but yes, we operate a world to where humans live and work and play. So that is also important to remember and keep it in mind.
I think for me in some of these questions, what's inspiring, what I like to emphasize is, and I think it's particularly having a senior now, and so I'm getting to the full cycle of the process. What it seems to me is in our current structure, we don't really get to complete for kids on topics. Our system is very good at introducing interest, getting to partake in different areas, but it does seem that when you look at whether it's someone going on to to a four-year college as an example, we actually don't have in our requirements a path that ensures that everything that's needed is to be complete. We get really close, but it's not full. When we look at our CTE, we're introducing students to technology, but not getting them to the point where they can execute a craft or be employable in that area. And so the example I've given before is I moved from Chicago. And so we have a lot of friends of children the same age. So I have kids in my life who will leave high school with their CNA, and I will have a kid who leaves high school with an interest in healthcare. Now, the other kid may never work as a CNA ever in life, but the system that they're operating within is a bit more structured upon to completion to be able to execute on a skill. And so I do hope that as we go through this process, we can think about that workforce ready part of it. And I think that's just adding small pieces onto what we do. I mean, I'm all for major transformation, but I think there's in some of the small motions we have, if we can think about that to completion piece so that I can go from my senior year into my, welding apprenticeship. I've done all the things that I'm ready for, and I can start that versus, oh, now I have to find out about the welding apprenticeship, or I have to find out what it takes to become an electrician or some of the other items. So I'm really hopeful that I know we have conversations kind of about what is industry like looking for or dreaming for. And a person who works in industry, you'll get a lot of opinions on that. But I think if you just look at like what is in the job description of basic employability, we have a really good way to get our students to being able to be competitive at the day they leave us. And so that's one of my hopes for sure. So if that's certifications, okay. If that's whatever else that may look like in to be ready day one is something that I'm very interested in.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think that my vision would be that every student in our district has the opportunity to graduate with a high school diploma as well as a certificate or some sort of real world skill that is marketable to them. And whether to what Director Mulling just said, whether they go and ever do work a single shift as a CNA, the work and effort and the skills they learn to go through the training and apply for a license and all of those elements that are just going to be really helpful, whether they're four-year college bound and ultimately go on to medical school. Those will just be really key moments that they will remember that will really help them. And so my hope would be in then reviewing for this meeting and all the career clusters that was part of this meeting where like the CT goes to their national, I would really hope that when this is all said and done, that our 4 comprehensive high schools would have certain specialized career clusters that our students would be able to really go deep in. And it isn't where it's just tasting. Our hope would be then that would flow down into middle schools. And middle schools is where they can taste. That's my point about like, oh, my middle school got to taste volleyball. And it's like, is she going to go be an extra volleyball? No, she's not. But the point is that that's what I hope that being a middle schooler is all about. And that high school, yes, still taste, but also by the time you're a junior, you should probably be able to start trying something on, because this is where it's low stakes, low costs, and be like, I thought I was going to be into marketing and realize after 2 years in junior and senior, I was like, nope, I'm not going to do that. Or I thought I was really going to go down this, Issaquah has a very robust sports medicine program and be like, oh, well, actually, I don't actually like touching people. So then that would probably not be it. So I think that we do need to give students the opportunity to go deep in the way you're very well experienced, Gibson Neck does. So they get to go, they're in the real world, they're in industry, and they're like, oh, well, I thought I liked welding and now I actually don't. So I think that's really key.
Thank you. I think I have a similar vision of the 4 high schools having a different focus of industry, where kids can come out with the ability to go into that industry if they have to. For me, the big piece is the number of students we have in our district that do not go to a 4-year college. What are we providing for them? Because it's not 1%, it's not 2%. It is a very significant number of students that leave here and then go, now what? their families may not be able to afford to go to a four-year college. That's something they're going to have to do while they're working. What am I working towards? And so I think it's really incumbent on us, and it almost feels like this bifurcation of, but I don't want it to be, but how do we ensure that these exceptional students have the means to do exceptionally well and get that deep knowledge in the area that they need for where they want to go in their four-year college degree, but other students that are stepping into the workforce right away have the ability to do so as well.
Well, and I think the other thing that's exciting about this is to give our students choices. So they have agency over the things that they want to explore, whether they explore it and determine they don't want to continue to do it, or they explore it and determine they really do. But my vision for this is that it gives our students more choice in where they go and what they do in their high school time.
Yeah, I would just like to echo everything that everybody to my left said, because they said it really well. By my left.
I know, but you're not echoing what I said.
Oh, I'm sorry. All right, that went right over my head. I'm sorry. But I agree on both levels that it's important for our, I don't expect an eighth grader to know what they want to be when they grow up, but I do think it's nice if they've had enough exposure to enough opportunities to go, yeah, that one doesn't sound good to me. This might be something I'm interested. And then as they get older and move into high school, they can actually, as Director Moraldo said, come away with something that they can put to immediate use, or they tuck it in their back pocket and they go to college and then they see whether it's useful or not, either way. But that is absolutely my vision as well. Great.
I think it'd be really helpful as you enter into these conversations with community and with students that you probably walk in with some not parameters or boundaries to the conversation, but at least some pre-visioning about where we're headed, like based on this conversation. I think this is going to be really helpful. So they know, I don't think that average high school parent would think like, oh, wow, the board has talked about wanting to have specialized programs at each one of our 4 schools that are different. When I think about like Lake Washington houses most of the WANIC programs, and that works for them because it's a central part of their district and they can make that work. Yes, we're part of WANIC, but for all intents and purposes, our students aren't going to drive up to Lake Washington Technical Institute and go take dental hygienist classes. I think the way our community is, like having a skill center and distributing that to our 4 schools makes more sense to me than building a skills center, because I think there's a lot of richness in being part of a comprehensive high school. And I don't want to lose those pieces either. It's a yes and to me rather than this is a segregated part and program. This is a segmented population of our students. So because we've seen through all the student feedback that the co-curricular parts of their high school experience are equally important to them as their academic pursuits. And so, but I think having some, things that you talk about ahead of time before you just say, okay, what do you want to talk about, will be helpful so people can dream appropriately.
Yeah, great, thank you.
Great. This is the exact feedback that we're hoping for that would actually put more shape as well. So thank you. And I heard the request of making sure that the board is informed along the way. Yes, of course. And the opportunities that come forward that are being planned, we're, going to put in motion, but also make sure it's on the calendar for many to see, and specifically the board.
Okay, and just last slide, those are a couple of the key pieces of the path forward over the next few months as we prepare to then begin launching and co-designing and collaborating in 2024 around this work. Thank you.
I would imagine that you have a lot of data. I only have a sophomore, so I don't really understand this high school and beyond plan that you guys had to do. But I understand sometime in the 8th grade through 9th grade year, they do some sort of interest things.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm assuming you guys have a lot of data across our district from students from the respective high schools that have taken like career interest type things. So I guess I would love to hear and know, not at this moment,
Mhm.
but like what are the career clusters
Yeah.
that seem to be consistent at our 4 buildings or 3 buildings currently, and what ones are more similar themes versus different across
Yeah.
the 3
Okay, yeah.
would be, I
great.
think, a really helpful thing as
Mhm.
well, just for us to know, because ultimately when it comes to placement of program and the capital costs associated with that,
Mhm.
that will be a conversation that we will have to be richly involved in. And so the earlier we know that, the longer planning that we'll have to be able to do.
Yeah, great.
Yep, I think the looking at data, renewing some of the data, putting it together with other data is going to be an important part of the work. And so that is certainly here on the possible path forward, as well as aligning specifically with capital projects, but also many other departments for how we move forward. So that's not just the only one.
I also want to make sure we're leaving any space or being open for student comment, because you guys are here and what we're talking about. So any thoughts or comments that you want to share, Hava?
Is this even working? Okay. I mean, this is something I really care about because I really love Gibson Neck and I love new and innovative models of schools. And I really liked what Director Gallinger said about incorporating innovative strategies into comprehensive high schools, because I know a lot of students from other high schools that I've interacted with who find the idea of Gibson Neck a little intimidating. And I know in my experience, it can be, but I think that education should really be a thing that is subjective. And I'm really excited to see what happens in our district as those innovative strategies are implemented in other places. So.
Thank you. Awesome. All right. DT?
Hi. I really agree with the idea that high schoolers should be well prepared right after high school to be able to be employed, or at least have some sort of real world, real world skill. However, I do want to bring up the idea that high schoolers right now, especially at our comprehensive high schools, are already feeling like, maybe they already have a lot of work or other commitments. And I'm just wondering how that balance would be with not only doing your traditional 4 years of high school, but then also pursuing some sort of certification on top of that, as well as managing your outside of school responsibilities.
That is a great question. When we talk about both and yes and topics, it is always comes down to the tension that exists of what do we have space, capacity, energy for, and then it does come down to choices and prioritization. But I appreciate, and the point is not lost to me, that you all even have expressed that there's a lot of work that you are obligated for in your high school career and journey. So it is a important topic that also comes up as other components of our executive limitation work as well. So let's keep that question, I think, at the forefront as we move through a lot of the work this year together.
And that voice is, sorry, and that voice is really important because unfortunately, how we're funded by the state, it's by seat time, meaning you have to attend a class in our high school to do that. There was a special waiver for Gibson Eck, but as we look forward, it might have to be where we have legislative assistance to be based on, hey, you're participating in this program rather than you're physically in a class 7 periods a day. And so those things that you're bringing up are really key for us, because there's a lot of moving pieces for us to innovate. I think one of the limitations in public school innovation is because there's so many restrictions for how school has to be delivered that are established by the legislature and OSPI that we really want to break away from. But you bring up a really good thing, because the funding piece is a really key piece.
Well, and I would hope too that we will be able to be creative in ways that may or may not require legislative help, but certainly we have CTE courses where we say, oh, and this also meets a math requirement, right? We have certain courses that can double into requirements. So you can take this course and still, meet another requirement. So I'm I'm hoping, assuming that we're going to try to pursue creative avenues in that respect.
Sidar. Either way.
I will just want to say that I feel that whatever the programs we're thinking about, where we explore careers in like higher grades, I feel this sort of program is going to be very, very helpful for those who are not going into a four-year college. And as you all said, that is a significant number of people. And I feel that our school in general, like all the requirements are they very much focused on going into the college? Like a lot of the requirements I feel are what colleges want. And there are these extra activities which are for these people, but I feel these programs like this would be more helpful to them than like the very kind of introductory level stuff that we have for as of now.
Thank you. I think that's a great place to end it. So we'll look forward to the continued conversation. I'm sure there'll be lots of creative conversations, how we can have it all in the yes and. So thank you. So next up, we have our monitoring of executive limitation 14 instructional program. Do I have a motion?
I move the board accept the monitoring report for EL 14 instructional program as presented.
Second.
Thank you. So what we'll do is we did start this conversation in a previous work study. I think there might be a little more for us to cover, if I remember correctly. But what we'll do is go through the presentation and then we'll have an opportunity for public comment prior to board discussion. So Superintendent.
And we do have the student representative
Oh,
that are
student
sharing
representative.
first. So I'd like to invite up
I
Dashida
had to
first,
do
I
my
believe, right?
standard notes.
Dashida's going first. Wait. Oh, you chose your order of sequence, so I'll let you just go with what you had selected, which might be okay. And together.
Awesome. No, try the power.
Hello? Okay. Hello, my name is Leilani Matthew Desiga, and this is my EL report for Gibson Neck High School. The data for this report was collected via Google form, and it was sent out to all Gibson students through their advisory Google Classroom through their advisors. The survey was sent out October 2nd, and the responses were collected for 24 hours through October 3rd. The survey garnered responses from 82 students, which make up 42% of the students enrolled at Gibson Neck. For the sake of the time, I will not be focusing on all of the questions asked in the survey. However, I will focus on the questions I thought were most important. The first question that was asked of the students was, how satisfied are you with the availability of specialized learning opportunities in our school? And the question was in the format of a 5-point Likert scale, which ranged from 1 being very dissatisfied to 5 being very satisfied. 48% of students answered with a 4, and 25% of students answered with a 5. Gibson Neck's mission is to personalize learning for each student and guide them as they engage in authentic project work. The data collected in the survey mostly supports this mission. I was interested to see how many of the freshmen responded in the points of the Likert scale, and exactly 50% answered with a 5. So that was kind of interesting for me to see. The survey then asked students if they had any suggestions or ideas to improve the opportunities for students to better explore their passions within our school. This was formatted for a long response, for a written response. And there was a common theme of adding some more structure through workshops, which would teach skills in makerspaces during exploration time. Our exploration time is essentially our free time to work on independent projects and make use of the makerspaces throughout our school. These spaces include the textile space, the production lab, the recording studio, places like that. One student also brought up a lack of variety in language being taught. Gibson Neck has a Spanish class which runs during exploration time, and this is the only language that Gibson Neck provides.
The next question that was asked was, how effectively does our school address the diverse learning styles of our students? This question again asked students to respond in the form of a 5-point Likert scale that ranged from 1 being very ineffective to 5 being very effective. And 60% of the students responded with a 4 and 20% responded with a 5. So it is important to note that students are able to craft projects to fit into their own, into our design process through personalized means, which address their own personal learning styles, which is something that I think personally is a really big strength of the school. And so the next question that was asked was, can you provide a short example of how our school has supported your specific learning style? And again, there was a common theme, and the common theme was the ability to have hands-on learning. Also the ability to set personalized timelines and due dates. Students also mentioned that staff being accepting of fidgeting and breaks was something that meant a lot to them because they felt accommodated and supported. All in all, this again seems to be a pretty positive response for this question. So then I asked, what improvements or changes, if any, would you suggest to enhance the support for diverse learning styles in our school? This was again a written response question. And again, there was a common theme throughout the responses, and I have, as a student, have heard this brought up many times at the school. And this is the acknowledgement of Alex Math being somewhat of an issue. Alex Math is an online math program, and it's the program that Gibson uses to teach its students. I know that this has been a work in progress. However, many students have expressed that having more options than just Alex is crucial for a better and lasting learning experience that aligns with their personal learning styles. The next question asked was, how consistent do you find the implementation of instructional programs across different D and C labs? To preface this, at Gibson, the instructional program is something that's quite different from the other high schools, as we kind of just talked about. The instructional program includes students' independent projects, internships, and D&C labs, but it can be most easily identified in these D&C labs. These labs are essentially 6-week courses, which are the most similar thing at our school to a traditional class at a high school. This was a multiple choice question where students were given the option to pick from very consistent, somewhat consistent, inconsistent, very inconsistent, and not sure. 68% of students responded with somewhat consistent, and 12% answered very consistent. One thing that does remain consistent throughout all courses and projects at Gibson is the use of the design thinking process. Ours goes empathize, define, ideate, prototype, and test. However, again, each D and C lab is instructed in a different manner with different end goals. Again, this was a pretty positive response from the students. So the next question was, do you feel that your dashboard accurately reflects your learning? Our dashboard are what assess our learning at Gibson Ek. And as a senior, I have watched the dashboard undergo some major changes in the past couple of years. I was very curious to see what response the students would have to this question. This was again a multiple choice question, and students were given the option to pick from strongly agree, neutral, disagree, and strongly disagree. And 46% of students answered agree, while 37% answered neutral. Again, I think this is a pretty positive response. I know that there has been a lot of work going into making it more reflective of the work students have been doing. So I think this is a pretty good turnout. The next question that was asked was, do you feel that the district provides enough curriculum materials to support your learning, which includes like books, software, and digital content? This was a multiple choice question, and only 11% of students answered no, insufficient, from the choices being yes, enough, and no, insufficient, and 3 being not sure. 63% answered yes, enough, which makes it seem that the students of Gibson Ek are feeling supported by the district provided curriculum material. This leads on to the next question, which was, are you aware of the opportunities to provide input on the selection of curriculum materials? This was formatted for a yes or no response. 58% of students answered yes, while 42% answered no. It is very common for students to lead a D lab alongside of an advisor. Doing this, the student gets to be very involved in material selection processes. Though through independent projects, there are oftentimes materials that students require that are not readily available at school and need to be requested. In my experience, the process of acquiring these materials is pretty straightforward. However, it's not that accessible unless you talk to a staff member.
So I was also interested to note that only 20% of those who answered no were freshmen. I was surprised to see how many older students answered no to this question. Next, to summarize the remaining questions that I wanted to highlight, they kind of relate back to EL 15 that we discussed previously on technology. And the responses on this were mainly positive. Again, most of our school day is spent working on computers. We work on our computers to do ALEX during content time, and we also access assignments through Google Classrooms and communicate with our advisors and mentors through email. So we're on our computers a lot. And so students brought that up, and they mentioned that it made the research phase of the design process much more efficient. So that was kind of the overall feedback from the questions asked about the technology. Also, there was also specific experiences that were highlighted, like the use of certain softwares for learning how to do modeling and architecture and learning about like digital art and things like that. So again, it was very positive. And I think overall, the responses to this EL and the survey that went out were mainly positive, and I was really happy to see that. I think it would be beneficial to help students learn to identify where they can request curriculum materials, along with the addition of more variety in the math program. But I believe that with the response of the responses given from the students, the job is being done well. So thank you.
Thank you, Leilani.
Hello, my name's Nishita, and I'm looking forward to presenting my instructional program report in relation to EL 14. So the purpose of this report was to get student input on the instructional program in Skyline High School, which is one of the district's standard high schools. I sent out a Microsoft form via Canvas on Monday, October 2nd, 2023, and this closed within 3 days on October 5th. In total, I got 248 respondents from a total of 2,000 students in Skyline, which I think is a fair portion of respondents considering the time period of the form. Within the form, students were asked to rate their level of agreement with each statement through a multiple choice list of answers. And these were 6 questions. And at the end, I had 1 open response opportunity for additional questions, concerns, or comments any students might have had. Overall, the findings of this report were very positive, with in general 75% of students falling in the strongly agree, or neutral options, and the rest of the 25% residing in the neutral or disagree or strongly disagree. And this essentially highlighted a few areas for improvement, but it also showed that the district's doing pretty good in a lot of other aspects. So looking at the breakdown of the statements, the first statement asked, across course departments, delivery of content and evaluation of content mastery is implemented fairly and uniformly. And the data indicated a 50% positive response with 23% negative, which highlights a mostly positive but also mixed perception of content delivery and evaluation methods. And as I've been a student at Skyline High School, engaging in conversations with my peers, I've interacted with numerous students who express difficulties that they face with varied teaching methods within different classes of the same subject. And I also want to highlight that some students really do connect with their teachers, but there are also some disparities noticed by others. The second statement questioned if the learning materials provided, such as textbooks and online software, are useful and give opportunities to understand the classwork. And the data indicated a 64% positive response and 13% negative, which is overall very positive. And I know that the resources such as laptops and textbooks, while they may not be used on a daily basis, they still serve as a useful buffer in case a student wants to understand the material independently. And I also know that a lot of students really appreciate the online subscriptions they get through school accounts. And this includes Canva, Britannica, and Office 365. as well as additional resources. So I think the district is doing a really great job with this aspect. The third statement was my classes help me understand the subject matter well and prepare me for academic standards, including AP and IB exams, as well as real world applications. And the data indicated a 49% positive response and 19% negative, which shows mostly positive but mixed responses in perception of preparedness. And something I do want to highlight is Skyline exclusively offers the IB program. And a lot of students appreciate taking the IB course and they thrive in it, but they opt to take the AP test of that course instead. So this choice likely implies that they feel adequately prepared, but prefer the AP format over IB. And as for considering the real world applicability of the learning content, I believe that the courses teach sufficient material that if ever brought up in a real situation, students would be able to apply their learning. So I think that's really good to know. And for the fourth statement, it was my teachers and classes address unique learning styles and needs to ensure my optimized learning. And this indicated a 46% positive response with 24% negative, which reveals mixed perception of the adaptability of teaching styles. And this kind of relates back to the fact that Skyline is a standard high school and it's not as personalized as Gibson X. So this probably has something to do with the response. And personally, I have never really encountered anyone talking about this, but I think it's more of an internal opinion students hold than commonly expressed. So it might be something we want to look into a little bit more. For the fifth statement, it was the school provides enough options, including classes and extracurricular activities for me to explore and develop my talents, interests, and interest in specific areas. And the data indicated a 67% positive response with only 16% negative, which is very positive for the options of curriculum and additional opportunities. And I believe that the IBCP program and Skyline, or the IB career path, has a strong influence on this result. This program essentially allows students to take advanced courses relating to a specific career path. So this may be like business management or forensics, and they can focus on that area of academics. Additionally, Skyline has a pretty good selection of electives, clubs, and sports for students to do. There were also some specific requests for certain activities made in the open response portion of this form. So I did include some of the examples of these requests. A student asked for a photography class, another asked for archery, and another student asked for a water polo team. But I think from the district side, this aspect of the EL is thriving. For my last multiple choice response, I asked if the integrated technology in classrooms is sufficient and helpful for learning. And this kind of loops back to the previous EL discussed at the last board meeting, but it was also included in the description for EL 14, so I did include it in the survey. The data indicated a 66% positive response with 11% negative, which is again very positive for the integration of technology. To bring a positive note into my response, into my report, I included a quote that a student put in the open response part of the form. The student said, "I really love integrated technology. It is very helpful with the organization of my notes, and Canvas is a tremendous help with keeping my classes organized and getting help from teachers." And I thought that was really nice to hear. And at the very end, I had an open response portion, and I asked students to share any questions, concerns, or comments they may have about the instructional program. And I found a couple key things to highlight within this portion, and we'll just go into them in order. So first, students expressed concerns regarding the class difficulty and consistency. And they emphasize a need for consistency in class difficulty across teachers, which would help ensure a fair learning experience for everyone. And I do know this is really hard to balance because teachers do need to have creative freedom with the learning curriculum in classes. But I do think it's really hard to find the balance, but students do express some concerns regarding this. So one student said, "Overall, I think the curriculum is going well. My biggest concern would probably be how some classes vary and classroom routines are not same between teachers." And another key aspect I noticed was a lack of study guidance in which students asked for more
clear study guidance from teachers, which would be helpful for preparing for tests and quizzes. And I think the best way to address this would probably be to emphasize the resources given to students. I don't think they necessarily know how helpful it could be. And I think that'd be a pretty simple solution for this. A student said that teachers should have more resources to look at in case we need help. And I think that kind of covers that topic. Another thing I wanted to address was grading standards. Students expressed the importance of standardized grading systems to maintain fairness in assessments. And I think this kind of connects to how in Skyline, each teacher can have a certain grade percentage have a different like letter grade. So a 90% in one class might be an A, whereas in another, it might be an A minus. And this does have an impact on your GPA. And students weren't very thrilled about that. And that might be something we want to look into. And of course, being a high school, students did want to complain a little bit about the excessive workload. Just saying there's too much outside of school work. But I think that really depends on like which classes you choose to take. If you go for IB classes, you're going to have a lot more workload than if you chose a regular pathway. So I'm not sure if there's anything we can do effectively that would eradicate that concern completely. And I think it will linger no matter any steps taken. But I did want to address that. Overall, I do think it was a positive response, and I think it really enlightened the perspective of students. I also have some visual charts in case you'd like to look at, but thank you for taking the time to listen to my report.
Thank you. Great job, both of you. Very thorough. Superintendent.
Great, thank you. We have Dr. Dana Bailey and Rich Mellis coming up to the podium. As they come up, I'd like to just extend my deep appreciation to both Tashida and Leilani for their very thorough work in sort of reflecting on this executive limitation on instructional program, as well as their outreach and engagement with their respective school communities. So thank you very much. Very thoughtful and very well done. And a couple of comments to frame here before we dive in. And I do want to just note, when we share the versions on the website for both a red line version as well as a clean version, one of the things that we are committed to is making sure if there are shifts in the interpretation that then does shift some of the corresponding evidence. And I do want to say last year, I did speak quite a bit around universal design for learning as an important approach that we might take that's rooted in brain science and how that can help us think more deeply around how we reach all types of learners, because we know that each student is very different in how they learn and how they consume information and how also they want to represent their knowledge as well. So that was made more prominent in the executive limitation. And then overall, for me, this is very much around how we think about the approach, our overall system, and our process to calibrate, train, and learn about how the system is working as part of an instructional program as an overall frame. And we have this year, we are doing this report before we are doing our ends monitoring. So there's a bit of focus here on, again, the systems that we're doing, that we're taking, the systems that we have in place and the steps we're taking to continue to improve our instructional program. So I do want to note that, and I'll turn it over to Dr. Bailey.
Thank you, Dana Bailey. Thank you for the opportunity to present tonight an update on an instructional program. Universal design for learning is an approach to creating conditions in the classroom where the adults proactively design for learner variability, making room for learners of a wide variety of learning styles and previous experiences to join in the lesson and learn at high levels. As our system grows in practice and understanding of the principles of UDL, we'll become experts in thinking about learning with flexible ways to achieve firm goals. Experts in this field give many examples parallel to life, but they all start with the same premise. One size does not fit all. Right-handed can openers just don't work for left-handed people. Steeped in the brain sciences, the CAS research, and universally designed thinking, the instructional planning creates multiple entry points into learning. Recently, Superintendent Taoyik observed a kindergarten class where students were practicing writing letters, first by picturing in their mind, then writing it in the air, then writing it with pencil and paper. This teacher used universal design principles when planning to the firm goal of the practice of writing lessons while allowing for students the flexible means to get there in their own way. Universal design has three umbrella categories of engagement, representation, and expression. Lessons that provide multiple means of engagement include learning activities that are authentic, communicate to real audiences, reflect a purpose that is clear to learners. Engagement planning includes activities that foster the use of imagination to solve novel and relevant problems, make sense of complicated ideas in creative ways, and generate a personal connection to the learning. It's the why in the school day. Multiple means of representation allowed for multiple forms of communicating information to go beyond simple choice of student outputs. A classroom embracing multiple means of representation plans to activate or supply background knowledge, highlight patterns, see relationships between big ideas, build technical and academic vocabularies, and offer choice in how students represent their learning. It's the what in the curriculum and the content. Multiple means of expression engages the use of goal setting, executive function, and strategy development. It maximizes the use of assistive technologies and builds in by design graduated level of support when and where needed. This is the how of learning. And as an example was highlighted in our student report today about how they use Canvas to stay organized in their work. Integrated multi-tiered systems of support works hand in glove with the universal design. This is the framework or structure that supports all learners throughout our system. The universal screeners and diagnostics help school staff know students as individuals, use data to inform educational plans, match the appropriate intervention to the student need, deliver what's needed, when it's needed, and in the right dosage. Large-scale review of data inputs such as SWIS allow building teams to respond to known and bubbling concerns. For example, if the SWIS data reveals a large number of students are struggling to settle down after recess, a Tier 1 intervention of reteaching after recess expectations could be really helpful. This decision point of if the concern is wide enough that most students in the group would benefit from the re-education, that's a Tier 1 step. If only some of the students are struggling in this area, a small group reteaching or a Tier 2 intervention is appropriate. Recently, I watched an expert playground supervisor prepare a small set of very small children for recess, and she started it like this. Yesterday, we had hurt feelings at recess because not all of you were enjoying playing tag. And so the rules for tag are soft touching and staying on the black top. You don't have to play tag, but if you do play tag, I'm expecting you to follow the rules. So this just-in-time teaching for some students set them up both with options and a refresh of expected behavior. Using data to inform next steps, both academic and behavioral, is an element of the MTSS approach. Students finding success in the core content is our plan, but when the students aren't finding successes, the adults need to be ready to make informed choices about what to do next. As a system, we need to be ready because you cannot intervention your way out of an incomplete Tier 1. Throughout the strategic planning process, we've been attentive to a strategic goal centered on increasing success in student outcomes. Through discussions about how to move the needle in the next 3 years, we know we'll need to lean on research, examine the data that reveals disproportionate achievement, utilize interventions, and be in a constant cycle of inquiry. We recognize disproportionality and institutional opportunity gaps and are committed to closing these gaps. We talk about, think about, debate, and dream about data all the time. We look at cut scores and scale scores and group students across the system and examine performance by race and by program. We have looked for the very best examples of high-level indicators that represent a collection of skills, significant data points that have emerged as salient and research-supported markers that represent many academic and intellectual growth steps. Being laser focused on 3 data points does not mean internally that we aren't watching all of the other imperative data points, but we bring forward 3 major milestones of 3rd grade phonics, successful completion of Algebra 1, and a successful 9th grade year. Students who are fluent decoders in 3rd grade showed strong evidence of being on level overall reading. Students with known lags in phonics in the early years need and deserve additional and specific teaching in the area of phonics. Highlighting third grade phonics does not diminish all the other learning before and after, but it is a known measure to watch and to make sure the core program is meeting the needs of most of the students and that additional supports are available and ready for those who are not mastering at the same level as their peers. Successful completion of Algebra 1 is a known pivot point that represents the culmination of the middle school math path and the beginning of the high school one. During COVID, algebra proved a genuine challenge for some students. ISD data shows this course has a relatively higher failure rate when taken at the high school, even with several options for students to get intervention support. Successfully completing Algebra 1 is an achievable goal for ISD students, and to see measurable change in this data point, we'll need to be focused on understanding the why behind the struggle, engaging students in the relevance of this content, and building confident learners. Our third data point is a successful ninth grade year. Research indicates that ninth grade holds the highest number of failed classes in high school. Our own data indicates that only 83% of ninth graders in the 21-22 school year earned all their credits. The disproportionate achievement of a successful ninth grade year is concerning. Being on track to graduate at the end of ninth grade includes the habits of scholarship, strong attendance, on-time work completion, resilience, persistence in learning, and growing in a sense of belonging to your high school, in addition to earning all your credits. Prevention steps are known to show results by intervening before students fail, and tracking data for ninth grade success will keep this at the front of mind throughout the year. Pouring into ninth grade students with additional support and attention to those who, with historic and persistent disproportionate achievement, includes intentional thought to why some students aren't achieving, why strong attendance is challenging, where they are worried about their own progress, and how to match the intervention to the student need, while measuring the effectiveness of intervention and being relentless in the pursuit of the right mix of encouragement, engagement, and relevance to capture students who are falling off track to graduate in the messy and marvelous year that is ninth grade. This monitoring report shares the structure of what the adults do to build a Tier 1 core program across the grades and the system, and to reveal some of the ways that student agency and choice is present in both course selection, in coursework, and in elective activities. Last year, this monitoring report occurred after ENS2, where the student outcomes were reported. We'll be very excited to share student outcomes through the ENS monitoring because we're inspired by the students and their achievements. The team is here to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. Why don't we check for public comment? Any in the room? Any on Zoom? Thank you. Questions, comments from the board? I think you're first. Thank you, Director Gallinger, for taking us off.
I was like, I don't want to go first. We got cut short in our conversation for this work study before we got to talk about the data points. And I would just want to highlight that in my mind, I understand why iReady is a marker that you've chosen. But for me, that would be considered more of a formative assessment mark on for our students in our district. And I would still want to see our third grade SBA scores as part of our strategic plan reporting for third grade. Those are externally validated data that allows us to be able to compare to our peers, both regionally and nationally. I think that's really important. That'd be like saying like, oh, well, we're just not going to use NAEP. And I know you guys haven't said that we're not going to use that, but from what you've listed for third grade, it just lists iReady. And so for me, that will be an incomplete report for strategic planning results if it doesn't include third grade SBA scores. So that's what I want to say to kick it off.
This is a good place to maybe invite some dialogue. So for part of the strategic planning sort of concept of the metrics is that are we identifying data points that are movable, manageable, and measurable? And one of the challenges with the 1-year assessment is that we don't know that until after the year is over. And so what's hard for us, we want to look at so you're right about the formative question. So I know that that's not being discounted here, but when we hone in on what are those metrics that we can actually move the needle on and take lessons and insights from in the middle of the year so that we can adjust course is a very important part of the strategic plan overall monitoring process. So it's not to say it's neither nor, but it is both and. And I know that we would certainly not lose sight of the SBA scores as well.
Yeah, I agree. It's a yes and that it should be both, because I think it is more formative. And I've been told for 3 years about how the iReady scores track with SBA. So therefore, let's put our money where our mouth is. And if we see movement in our iReady scores and we don't see movement in our SBA scores, that will lead us to challenge some assumptions that we probably need to challenge.
Right. And the iReady testing is done multiple times throughout a year. Yes.
3 times a
3
year.
times. Right. So we can see, or you can see the progression for our students as they take it 3 times in that year, and the expectation of their proficiency increase over the course of the year.
Right. It also allows for the opportunity to shift gears if that's what's needed. If the student isn't making progress or the intervention isn't working, we would see that much more readily. And the system would be allowed to increase the dosage, change the frequency.
Right. So you can do intervention more in the moment, or as you see the scores from each of the time the iReady testing is done.
Yeah, and two things about the and not or is in looking at those is that we now can look at third graders and have up to 12 data points by the time they get to that third grade SBA. And we can graphically track their growth curve over time in both phonics and 5 other domains of reading, as well as overall reading. So it's giving us a wealth of data. We have started getting imports of iReady scores from other districts. So now when new students move in, if they come from an iReady district, we are now getting their scores from other schools. We meet 3 times a year with the iReady staff that give us state and national comparisons to how our students are doing, both in growth rate and in overall proficiencies. And they help us then identify also kind of some of the curricular resources that we can point ourselves to address when there are oddities in the data, if we see any of that happening. So we're getting some really great support in that. That certainly does not replace the use of the state assessment, but has greatly enhanced that. So thank you for the feedback.
It would just be the same thing for me for the 8th grade algebra, right? It's not about the class grade. So whether you choose 8th grade SBA math as sort of more externally validated benchmark, or if you think a different grade level is more important, since I know we no longer have an algebra and of course tests in our state, but having that external touch of data beyond just X% of students got an A, B, or C in algebra 1, I don't think really would be a satisfactory part for me to feel warm and fuzzy about improving.
Thank you.
Well, let's see, you have a student. Okay, well, I was just gonna, because the one is the use of the data points in the strategic plan and what our goals are over those 3 years. That doesn't preclude all the other data that we get out of our ENS2 monitoring, right? So all of this information we still get every year through that monitoring. Yes.
Yes, I think Rich was about to say the same thing. Again, the strategic plan is about the system is about progress monitoring. So are we making progress, and how do we know that within the year? And so we're in new territory, right? As we look at that, because we have, through even our executive limitations and ends monitoring, we are looking sometimes a year and a half in arrears, depending on where we are in time. And I know that it is, it feels, while we want to do that take and look at that moment in time of where the data is and look at it year over year, We also have, I hear the conversation with this board, but also I have a desire to know more quickly what is happening in our system. How do we know? It might be not perfect, but then it leads us to more questions in the moment. So we're not looking and admiring in arrears, or I think I've heard the language, admiring the problem after the fact. So the strategic plan monitoring sort of hope is that we can look at data more quickly, again, meaningful, movable, and measurable within the time period that we're actually doing the work. It's more about implementation. And that's a difference to me compared to the end report, which have a much more set of robust set of data points that reflect annual goals and annual metrics.
Right, because along the same line with Algebra 1, and you're talking about the passage of the course, you can be looking at grades throughout the year for students and their progress and or interventions that they need to, hopefully by the end of the year, ensure that they're passing the course.
Yeah, it's that question of both having leading indicators so that we're not waiting for a final assessment, and also I appreciated what Director Gallinger said about we'd be disappointed if these leading indicators didn't result in other indicators as well increasing. So the theory of action of these three leading indicators are that there are things that we can monitor, be very responsive to, and will result in better overall outcomes for students. That's the theory that we're putting to the test, and we'll monitor very closely is the plan.
Siddharth, did you have a question? Thank you. Other comments or questions from the board?
Mostly a comment, maybe a question in here. On number 6, which talked about uniform implementation of curriculum. First off, I appreciated the fact that there's an exception in here because I don't think it's something that the board would necessarily have been aware of in terms of middle school biology. And I guess I'm sort of curious as to how you found out about that. I mean, do you do a deep dive into every curriculum? I'm sorry, was it Harlan? Okay, because I was going to say, do you do a deep dive into every curriculum every year, or was this specific?
We don't do a deep dive into every curriculum every year. It was alerted to us, and we thoroughly investigated, in particular the middle school, and found some remedy was needed. And they've already met this year and have, I think, a really clear pacing plan and way to go about getting a comparable middle school biology class delivered.
Okay, I actually did kind of, I remembered your input. I was just, as I say, I appreciate that the district is owning
Yeah.
up to the problem.
Well, and this one was interesting because our mechanism is to bring the science department leads together monthly, and just like every other department leads together monthly, and really ask the question about how's the curriculum going? Do we need to do adjustments to our scope and sequence? Are there problems of practice that we need to uncover? And in this case, when you're bringing the department leads together, they weren't as attuned to what was happening at the middle school. And so that actually raised a question of us looking at all of our middle school, high school courses and saying, wait a minute, let's just double check again on those courses, because the high school department lead may not have awareness, day-to-day awareness, because they're not seeing them in the hallway. They're not doing those daily checks. They're not in those meetings. And the middle school department leads are thinking about the middle school curriculum. So we just had a gap in that monitoring our plan. So it did raise a question that made us think about our systems and what we need to do with those particular courses that fall in between.
Thank you. Thank you. Director Morales.
Well, I was going to say to that end, it's good to hear that actually that piece, and I don't know that I see it in the report, like here was the exception and here's what we're doing about it, because I think that's a really important piece for us to understand.
Yeah.
Here's where the process is that we typically have, because that's what I didn't really know, like how would it come up?
That's what I was getting.
Because we had the same experience several years ago around a certain unit in a history class that just wasn't getting, it was the last unit. And so they were just skipping it. And so it's good to know that there's some discussion around that. So I think it would be helpful to have that in the monitoring report. Like, here's how we make sure that that doesn't happen. Because I don't know, I don't think I was aware of what the process was. And that there was one, that the teachers are getting together. Where are you at in the sequence? Are you going to make it to chapter 13? Because we used to have a geometry book that didn't teach proofs until chapter 13. And so if you don't get there, you don't learn the material. So it's good to hear that. And so I think having that in the monitoring report would be helpful.
And just to add on to that, I think it's helpful that you've taken it and gone beyond biology to other high school subjects, because that was one of the questions I was coming in with, was how do you connect these, if for this example, biology teachers that are in middle school with the high school teachers that teach biology, to kind of continue to ensure that alignment. And that would be true for the other courses that are high school credited courses, like the geometry, Algebra 1, Spanish, the foreign language courses.
Which just brings me to my comments about this. So for 1 and 6, it'd be helpful probably if there was a link that showed by year, the last, like, so let's say it shows 2016. These were the curriculum that was adopted in that. So we could get a sense on like how long ago, like I remember, like in my first year on the board, we went through and did elementary math. And that was a really big deal to change our math curriculum in 2017. So why I asked this is, so for instance, foreign language has been quite the experience in my household. And I think the curriculum, or at least the supplementary materials, is really unimpressive. And I would be curious to know, is it something that was adopted a really long time ago, or is this like something that was just adopted 2 years ago and I get to live with this for all of my student and next students' experiences? Because I am concerned specifically about foreign language, to what Director Moore just brought up. Yes, I'm glad you have addressed it for biology, but I think foreign language is another potential gap we have between our middle schools and our high schools. And I know we only offer Spanish in our middle schools, but I still think even there, watching that what I believe was a disconnect between the transition from middle school to high school with Spanish. And just in general, I think our foreign language curriculum could use a lot of improving, and having us to be able to look at one snapshot and like, oh, look at this was the year these were adopted. So the most recent adoptions of our various core curriculum, I think, would be really helpful for us to see, because you have such longevity on the board. We can't always remember. Now, if my colleagues to my right have probably gone through multiple math adoptions, and those are a really big deal in this community. So I think that would just be helpful for us to be able to see.
Yeah, that is an oversight. We usually linked, because we have that on one web page, it's a quick link. We can certainly follow up with that link to all the adoption dates so you can see. And the world language adoption was one of my COVID casualties because we were ready to pull the trigger on a brand new world language adoption when COVID hit. And during that time, we decided that elementary ELA and middle school math needed to take precedence over continuing the world language. So it's definitely at the top of the list of, it is one of our older curricula that we need to, we recognize that's in the list to be revised, to be up to date with the best practices and the current research on world language. So do know that is one of those on our list to be getting to as soon as we financially can.
Thank you. Any final questions or comments? With that, we have a motion on the floor. We'll move to, oh, sorry.
I did, but
Oh,
I have
shoot.
to go back to which number it was. Because I think I know it's really long. I think because it was around, we had conversation from or report from the students around experiences in one class versus another class, consistency. And I know that that's in here. And so does that again go back to those department head conversations, but do they know what's necessarily going on? If it sounds like, in this class, it's, a lot of students, I think we even had evaluations, or we had some numbers around in math classes, like the same math class, what grades were student getting? And we had some teachers where they're getting a significantly higher number of students are getting D's and F's, which tells me that there's something different about being in that class versus this class over here. That's the same exact class, math class, but something inside there's different. So I didn't really feel, and maybe it's a feeling and I don't know what number it was, I didn't feel like I was getting out of the report how we maintain, how we make sure, or how we're analyzing whether or not those things are happening. Because I think, and you can remind me, Deshita, what your number was, but it was pretty significant, the number of students that felt like, hey, yeah, I'm not getting a consistent experience. And you can turn on the microphone. Was it 6? I was scrolling.
So the number for that was,
Yes.
can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. We had 50% positive, so 9% strongly agreed with the statement that across course departments, delivery of content and evaluation of content mastery is implemented fairly uniformly. 41% agreed, 27% were neutral, 16% disagreed, and 7% strongly disagreed. And then we had responses in the open portion as well.
And I think that's probably where you kind of get a sense more. And so I'm just wondering, how is that evaluated? Or is it that same scope and sequence and you're having conversations? And
there's a lot of aspects to that can introduce variability in a class. Our mechanisms, the scope and sequence is really critical. We've been slowly working through those scope and sequences and adding some common learning experiences that we pull out of the pacing guide. So they get the scope and sequence, but each curriculum does come with teacher guides. So we're pulling what out of those teacher guides needs to be included in every course. So we're working on improving our scope and sequences to include those essential learnings. And then when we get to EL12, we'll talk about how we're trying to get more standardization on volume of work and categories of work. So there's lots of effort there. I really appreciated the report that there's in our student report that you've got the desire for teachers to bring their layer to the curriculum, their personality, their interests, their passions. That introduces some variability. And then, to us, one way that we want to navigate this is universal design for learning, because it focuses on those firm goals, but then it focuses more on the variability being adjusting to the students, allowing the student planning for that variability of the students and giving them more options for ways that they interact with the material. But the point is taken that there is we're trying to define what needs to be firm and what can be loose. And that is a constant act of reflecting and continuing the conversation and refining the common expectations that we have. So,
and I think that we want and welcome that variability of the teacher practice. I think that's really good. I think the predictability is really important for a grade, right? 75, 80, 85, 90, all those should mean the same thing to our students. And at least in my experiences at Skyline, in the 2 years that I've been there, they're widely different. And so that makes it really difficult for students navigating that space. And so if they want to toggle, it'd be great if they had the same cut points for each thing, and then they toggle their practice accordingly to broaden or narrow how they want to, but that students all have that same expectation would be really helpful.
Well, but as an extension of that, though, you have to be careful because you can have grading practices be similar, but the workload of a course where a teacher thinks this particular class is the be-all class, and I'm going to ensure that you are all chief scholars in this versus another the same course with a different teacher where we're gonna get through the course and teach you the bare things that you need to know, and that becomes problematic when you have such a difference in the expectations of students in the same course.
I mean, I think we recently dealt with this with a one PE class in the district that required a 5K, right? And an evaluation of that. Or back in the day, a health class, a single health class in the district that required 50 hours of community service. So that's, I guess, so where do we go from, yes, I want teachers to be passionate about what they teach because they will do a better job teaching it and relaying to the students. But then how do we ensure that what's happening is still fits in that scope and sequence, and we don't have these outliers that then create a stressor for students that goes beyond what the class should be. And I think that to me is my biggest concern is how are you going about capturing that? Or is that something that's happening at the building level and that, the principal as the teacher leader should be capturing those kind of things?
It's constant at all levels. We need to be constantly going back to saying, do we need to refine the scope and sequence to give better clarity about what needs to be consistent across classes? And at the local level, teams are working daily together to make adjustments, and then individuals are making decisions on a minute by minute basis. And sometimes, so it's a constant effort at all levels to try to find that balance of allowing some variability, but with predictability of outcomes, predictability of core learning experiences. And we'll just keep at it and keep trying to get better and better at that monitoring.
Okay, now I'm done.
We have time. Thank you for that robust discussion. And with that, we have a vote. So all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Motion passes. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Dr. Bailey should not go away.
So next we have on the agenda a conversation around resolving issues within the district. So constituent issue resolution. I appreciate us pulling this conversation together. We, I think, just had it last meeting. So appreciate you guys being able to come back quickly and share more on this topic. So please get us started.
Great. Yes. So this topic on constituent issue resolution is certainly a result of the conversation that came out of the most recent few board meetings. And in particular, as we sat back and thought about this, we thought this was a great opportunity to share all the ways that which we seek to problem solve and resolve issues with a variety of different people in our system. ranging from students to staff to families and even community members. So joining me will be Dr. Dana Bailey and Donna Hood, and I'll let them share their name and position when they come to the mic. But I wanted to kick us off and move to purpose of our time tonight. And I think you have the clicker, so I might need your help in advancing the slide. But our purpose tonight is really to provide an overview of how to resolve issues and the different systems of support for problem solving. We wanted to start with a sort of general approach and values, and I won't read all the items here on the slide, but one of the most important things is that issues are most effectively resolved closest to those who are involved. And so, the first area for where a student or a family member might go is to their teacher, a staff member at the school, counselors, deans, principals, assistant principals, trusted adults at a school building. So that is number one. But we also know that there are different ways that things are not always resolved immediately. And so, it does go to different places. There are ways that and procedures and supports in place for people to continue to bring their issue forward. And then you see here just lots of comments around communication and a request for civility, because when there are issues that people are facing, it often means that there's emotion to that. So we always have to remind ourselves of a code of conduct in this regard of how we can speak to each other and work with each other. And then we also are governed as a district just overall by privacy, confidentiality, and legality. We have different bounds under which we are able to share information. And so it's just important that we are bound by some of those guidelines and laws as well. I just talked about how this is, the best way to resolve an issue is to start with your school. And we have very clear pipelines to how to do this. And this kind of framework here is noted on our website, both as a district-wide for issues, questions, or concerns. And this framework is also listed on every single school website for where to start if you want to raise an issue. So it's just a reminder of this overall. And I think that I'll pass it to Dana to sort of tag on here and go from there.
Sure. Thank you so much. This is this informal way to raise an issue. Again, reiterating that you start as close to the people who know about the situation and also the people who are the closest to be able to help you resolve the situation. We really encourage everyone to go to a trusted adult and know that the adults are trained and can support getting the right information to the right people so that the process moves along. We want students and parents and families to feel heard and to know that their concerns are being brought forward. This can help to coordinate and filter and follow up where it needs to go as it is necessary. There are systems to support the questions in all forms. And in our training, we heard quite a lot that it does not matter how a concern gets brought forward. It can be through any of those email, phone, parking lot conversation, in person. A piece I wanted to bring forward, there's lots of ways to report, and we encourage reporting so that concerns are heard and problem solving can begin. But on the back of the student ID card, there are links to crisis lines and there are links to the district anonymous tip line. The district also has monitoring software. So if something is happening in the student's computer account during the school day and on a school computer, if there's something that is amiss, it can be noted and brought forward to the appropriate person. It's important that concerns are heard and things are followed up on quickly.
And I believe I'm Donna Hood, Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources. I believe one of the things we talked about a little bit when we created this particular presentation was about mandatory reporting to agencies like CPS, for example. There are times when staff might just feel a little uncertain. We train on that regularly, and we encourage them, if they are not entirely comfortable, they're always welcome to bring it to their assistant principal or their principal and work that process together. And sometimes it's just a little scary if it's the first time you've ever had to do it. Thankfully, it is not frequent, but it is something that's important for us to do correctly. And so then we also document that conversation and route it to the appropriate staff at the district office. That's just one kind of sort of reporting that we would be dealing with in a building. In this particular slide, you can see that there are regulations and procedures that govern both students sort of on the left side and staff on the right. So we wanted to show kind of the the dual methods that we use to look at different kinds of situations. And so there's lots of really good processes that are established and built, and we follow those if something really clearly falls into one of these categories. Particularly something like sexual harassment would be governed by a very particular procedure there. So we'll follow that always. And I think what's super important too is that we really do start from a place where we know that staff can't necessarily change behavior or address a problem that they don't know about yet. So we really do like to make sure that the people who about whom the concern is brought are also made aware of it as soon as possible. So they may not know, and sometimes they don't. And so starting from that place of giving people a chance to address the behavior, correct the concern, particularly when it's a lower level concern, it's important to us. Okay, so some of our regulations and procedures also have appeal levels to them. Not all of them function in exactly the same way, but you can see that all the various topics could start at really any staff person, and we would get it to the appropriate person to deal with that type of concern. And we really, as Dana was saying, we do encourage reporting. We don't ever want to discourage reporting. So we are very committed to receiving that in whatever form it comes in and making sure it gets into the hands of the most skilled people to deal with it. And usually that will start at the school level. Sometimes it starts at district level and we kick it back to the school. Could go both ways. And sometimes the school calls us immediately because they're like, oh, this came to me, but I need your help. This is not just a school issue. So either direction works. And then from there to an executive director typically. So if it's a school-based issue and it has to do with students, it may stay with the ed directors. If it has to do with some staff concerns, perhaps staff conduct, misconduct, then it would likely come to HR. From there, it could potentially go to the superintendent or a designee. And from there, it could certainly be appealed to the board, depending on the nature of the concern.
So we bring forward some examples of how concerns are brought forward. And I really want to reiterate that the opportunity to engage in the problem solving is very welcome. It's very welcome at the building level. It's very welcome at the district level to engage in problem solving, because if you don't know, you can't work on it. And so bringing forth problems is a welcome thing so that people can sit down together and understand the problem and provide some options. Last year, for example, we knew that there were two areas of concern at the high school level. The high school SEL lessons last year weren't everybody's favorite. And so I see nods at that front table. And so a team of people got together to really look at and take student feedback on how to make them better. And there were also shared concerns about the high school one-to-one plan. And so it was, again, the students' concerns were brought forward and the system evolved around to see what problem solving could take place. Here's two examples about an informal and a formal instructional, or the SSO and the parking lot. We have another example from instruction where a concern was shared about an adopted material, and the parent engaged at the teacher level and at the administrator level and at the executive director of teaching and learning, just kept working at it until a successful resolution was found. And the end result was the parent elected not to complete the request for reevaluation paperwork. But this is another example about an adopted material that a parent had a concern about, and they were able to work through the system to really understand what the point was behind that particular book and why it was there and how it was to be used.
This one has on it a sort of straightforward discipline appeal as an example. Folks have rights, of course, as you just heard tonight, probably in the work study session, to appeal discipline. And so you process that very carefully in the building, and you consult with your ed director if necessary, and usually write a response back to those families. This has another slide that contains a couple examples. Sometimes we have parent-to-parent conflict too, and this is kind of to Superintendent Talyak's point about dealing with the community at our large events, especially that can happen. So we provided an example of that and the way it may have gotten resolved in a building at an event. and often can be just handled right there on the ground in the moment. And this is what we pay our leaders to do, is to supervise and to make informed and thoughtful decisions in the moment. And then on that right side, sort of a staff to staff conflict that would have fallen under our civility policy. And sometimes there are moments when we may actually accelerate something, and that happens to be slightly accelerated example, but followed the process and resolved the issue.
Great. So I'll just jump in here and wanted to just make sure we revealed and showed all the various ways to resolve issues, and also some examples of where some of those issues can get resolved and at different areas and levels within the district. But again, start with your school when there is a question or concern, and the variety of staff members are there to help and assist. And that if that needs to progress and to take a different form and shape and turn, as often does happen, there are different avenues to do that, and they fall into the buckets of instruction and student and human resources. So that's where, we do see a lot of this, and trying to wrangle where do issues and problems and occur in our entire system. This was an exercise of trying to bring some clarity to that so that we could communicate that to the public. And want to also share that the school board role, which they know very well, but there's a certain level of that they play and role they play in some appeals, and that's a quasi judicial role. We also have a Washington State Governor's Office of the Education Ombuds, where, again, if people feel like their issue, concern, or question has not been resolved, that is another place to go. And so we do also have that on our website posted for as a resource.
Questions or comments?
So my overall, I think, concern, even bringing this up, was if I am a parent, I don't know, and frankly, I don't care what your regulation process is. I want to know how to make a formal complaint. And to me, I don't want to have to pick from 3 or 4 or 5 or 7 different forms. And even if I'm a staff member, why is it difficult? So I went to the issues, questions, and concern page, and it has the step of go to your teacher, go to your principal, go to your executive director, but it doesn't actually have a place to know how to log a formal complaint. And the process should not be cumbersome for them. Right now, we have a process that in place that is cumbersome for the user and easier for us. So we have different forms because that's easy for us to say, oh, well, this is this policy and this regulation, and this is this procedure over here. But as a user, I don't care what your method is. I don't care if it's a HIB complaint or a complaint that the curriculum isn't teaching chapter 13 of the history book. To me, I'm raising a complaint, and that's not on our page. And that's the part that I think is unclear. And I don't think that, this is a great presentation of what we currently do, but my statement is that what we currently do is not helpful for the parents. And it's not helpful for me to know, how are we measuring this? To be able to say, what is the mechanism by complaints are coming in, and here's how we're dealing with them. Do we have something like Swiss that lodges those complaints that are coming to the teacher and principal? Because one of our questions has been, how do we monitor the ones that never come to us, so that we know that they're getting resolutions? I would love to know that 90% of our issues are resolved at the teacher level. That would be great data, but I don't know that because there's no way to measure it. So what are the mechanisms by which the district should be taking a look at how are we handling issues? What are we doing for ease of use for the user, whether they're a staff member, a community member, a parent, a student? And then how do we communicate that out, and how do we continue to measure those? So that's really, for me, it's a bunch of questions that aren't in the presentation and aren't happening now. So it's hard to know what do I do with that. But I think that this is where there's a big hole in our processes.
Thank you for sharing that. I heard 2 different questions. The first was around And this was not intended to be this is where you go for your forms and your process. This is just how we have to then figure out how to route things, because we do not want to prescribe how a family member or staff member or community member shares an issue or a concern. And it does come in all ways. And we are trained to pick up what that issue and concern is and route it to the right and best place to start the process of resolution. So that's why the slide on page, we can go back to the presentation, page 5, it shows there are so many methods, and we have to be skilled and trained at being able to determine if someone makes a comment at an event in person and says, I observed X, and that X is illegal activity. Well, we quickly act on that one right away.
Yes.
So that is not, we don't say to that person, oh, can you please file a form? So that is very important to know, but this is peeling back, first and foremost, that it comes in all ways to us, and that we have to then figure out what is the topic. Is it a staff member issue? Is it a legal issue? Is it informal? And then we filter to figure out quickly, can we resolve this right away? And so our examples were meant to be illustrative of all the ways that happen. We didn't tell you exactly how it came in, although somewhere you can infer it was an in-person potential report or a direct observation. And so we can make that more clear that we do, this is part of the step to communicate this, is that we do accept.
I don't think that it's unclear. I think I'm saying that there is a gaping hole in the process by which it's not easy for the user to know, what am I supposed to do if I'm not getting, like the going to the assistant principal, you're starting to get into a formal complaint. So what is that process? So I'm saying that I guess I'm not communicating well.
Well, I think you brought up two different things, because the first one was really simple. I want to file a formal complaint and I can't find it. That's straightforward. That's something we could surely fix. I think your second thing was like, wouldn't it be nice if we had a Swiss data system to track, is much harder, because I think for the vast majority of complaints, I think people don't want to file formal complaints. Something happened in the classroom, something happened at a game. I want somebody to know about it. I want somebody to fix it. I want an answer to why my kid was treated this way in class, whatever. But they don't really want to file a formal complaint. They just want the problem fixed. And so from that standpoint, I mean, yes, I guess when these sorts of questions are raised, somebody could sit there and log it into a system, but mostly they're not going to. Mostly they're just going to, I can resolve this really easily by having a conversation, or I can't resolve it really easily. And we go through some of the things that you guys talked about in the presentation. But I think, I mean, and we're frustrated by it, because it would be lovely to have a Swiss system for this, but I don't see that happening, because most complaints aren't formal.
Right, but that would be done then by the part of the staff member who received the complaint. If I had an issue come to me and it was illegal activity, and yes, I'm going to call the law enforcement, but I also where can I register that we received this issue? Or, I got a complaint from a parent that, little Johnny hit Maggie, and now, I want to make sure that doesn't happen again. So I guess it's, or I don't feel like it was resolved adequately, but I don't want to escalate it as a formal, but I need somebody to know. Then it would behoove staff then to say, a complaint came in, here's how we resolved it, and it's closed. But there is no sense of what that is.
Director Moore.
How is, I guess, staff trained, like our teachers? Because really we're saying when there's an issue, it's, let's take it from a family perspective, that it's an issue and you take it to the teacher. That I would say by and large, families want that to be informal, right? I want to bring up my issue, and if we can get it resolved right there, even for the families, I think that's the best, right? For everything. It's when something it can't be resolved there, and it goes up to the assistant principal or principal, because that's what the steps say. At that point, I would hope that the principal and assistant principals are kind of trained in how to help families if they have an issue that, again, can't be resolved there, how to go through a more formal process, because it seems like it would start to be the formal process to take it up to the executive director, which is what's the next thing on the list. So how are they trained to kind of handle that and move things from being more informal, which is where it may start with the teacher, to becoming more formal as it moves up towards the executive director?
Yeah, an example of the way we do that. So we train our administrators, for example, to think about the difference between misconduct versus evaluation. So that is one of the distinguishing filters and things they have to think about right away if it has to do with staff. So I'll need them to figure out which one they think it is. And if they're not sure, they call HR and we sort through that with them to determine, okay, is there going to be an HR involvement here? Or is it about evaluation? And can we coach you through how to either recoach the behavior, how to note that in the evaluation? So that supervisor is that next step, but we assist them, especially if it's gray and they're not certain if it's going to be one or the other. In some rare instances, it can be both, but usually it falls into one of those buckets and we just need to talk it through with them. But we do train on that, and we find that's really important. And then we consult regularly with them. As far as students, I don't know if you want to chime in on that one.
I don't know if you were leading somewhere, but there's the training that goes through, the mandatory reporting. We, like all people, are trained on that every year about when students are in harm, what we need to do right away, like that day, and all those timelines. We do, just to reiterate what you said, I do believe that starting with the closest contact to the people who know what's happening and the people who can really solve the problem is the place to start. But I hear you on what is the process. And people make decisions in buildings all day. People make decisions and respond to entry level student on student conflict, and principals make decisions on those all the time. That's many times a day.
I think the challenge here is I'm not sure that I know I'm not hearing or I'm not communicating materiality of what we're talking about, right? Are we talking about we want to enter in a system when people are upset about how the pickup line works, or about the things that are in the thousands of reports a day or concerns someone has? Are we talking about some level of materiality? And when we talked about in our work study, and we were talking about discipline, I think the one principal, and I can't remember his name, but what he was saying is one of the things they're looking at is this an issue to do with a single student, or is this an issue to do with a place that impacts multiple students? Or I think he said 10 or more is what I wrote down. And he said that was system-wide. I wrote operational. And so I think the challenge is, as someone who actually has a degree in usability, I've never seen this page and I would never have used it. I would never have gone to this page that has the 1, 2, 3 to get to a form. I understand wanting to present people the way to take action where you find them, which is a bit different. So I think for me, what would be helpful is to get to some level of materiality. I don't personally want to know about all the concerns about the pickup line or the wilted vegetables or whatever they are, but I do have concerns about questions about staff conduct that may impact one or more students. And so I think part of it is trying to tweeze out, for me, I guess for this conversation, to get to some reasonable, what we can actually do about it is some level of materiality or impact or something else. And then if it's a usability question, then sure, we can add a form here that says, if you have anything you want to say, you can add it here, you can add it to your e-news, you can add it to every school site. But I think we kind of have that today. I can go report things in each of my kids' schools today. So that's what I'm struggling with the discussion. If it's about getting down to, maybe it's more about what do we care about? And so we can put some bounds about it. Is it once it gets to a assistant principal or principal, then there's some logging so we can see what goes on. What I care most about is themes. If there are themes of behavior, like a question I asked in the earlier session, do we have a parent code of conduct? We have a student code of conduct that they have to sign. As a sport parent, I sign parent codes of conduct all the time in the club world to make sure we participate appropriately on the sideline. So if we have a number of reports that are about parent bad conduct at sports events, then what do we do systematically to interrupt that behavior? That's what I care much more about is thematic items that we're taking action that can impact the entire system. But that's just where I'm at.
Well, and part of the reason I think I brought this forward is we had reporting, some of the statistics that came back to us, the data that came back was about one form of reporting that got escalated. And I'm like, what, but then you've shown me there's all these different ways.
Right.
So there is, some meaning to the data. Otherwise there's no meaning to the data if it's only partial data.
Right.
And so I do think that that's part of why this came up. And there still isn't on this page, if there is a difference between informal and formal and somebody has to fill out a form, why isn't that? How do they know that? And where do they find that? And that piece is definitely missing.
So we've gone round and round with this every year since I've been on the board. And it seems to me that it would be helpful. So for instance, if there was a web page on our hosted on our site that had drop down, you chose an informal concern versus formal complaint. And then you have like this, number page 6 listed is the examples that parents or community members or students would choose to, like, these would be the buckets that would belong in a formal complaint that talks about like legal things, other misconduct things. And then informal concerns that would then give examples of like, hey, these are the concerns that would be best filled out this way. And then it's a really easy web-based form that they could like mark their, like, choose their building and choose what their concern is and how they think it would be best solved. It would be short and sweet, but it would also give examples like concern about safety at a parent pickup line, or like give some examples. I think that's what would be really helpful. And then you would have that, and you could just have a link where they didn't want to do web-based form, they could print out the form and fill it out themselves. And then I think that would take care of the tracking part. But I think until we see a way for people to easily engage and say, hey, here's a concern that I have, address it before it rises to the level of becoming a formal complaint. In the same way that most of our educators, they address all the informal behavioral issues in the class before it ever becomes something that they refer on to any of our building principals. I think it'd be really helpful and informative for both the buildings as well as the district. And I think until you house them both together and give examples for what belongs in what bucket, and sure, will people fill them out like wrong and be like, this is clearly the one that's an informal concern clearly belongs something more formal, but you guys would be the ones that at whatever level to identify that. But I think that would be really helpful to get at, I think, the discomfort that we've always felt about the lack of ability. Like, how do we know that there's an informal complaint process that's robust, concern process that's robust enough that people feel comfortable using it? Because what we hear as all living in this community is we hear all those all the time, everywhere we go in our daily lives. And I think that continues to reinforce that there's probably a better system approach to this, to where people can feel heard. And that's why authentic engagement is on our strategic plan, because it's such an important thing, I think, for us to get to.
And I do want to clarify, thank you for these comments and discussion, because it is a range, right, of sort of a desire for significant detail, which actually does have operational implications, right? But also trends and themes. So the range of discussion is helpful here, because I do know that the board has gone around, you said round and round on this topic every year. And so we're trying to do different things to help also unlock more, right, path forwards. I don't want to be misleading with the formal and informal, because that's the whole point when it comes in all types. We filter to help get it to the right channel. And so how it gets filtered is more of an art than a science. So I don't want to be misleading and say that, okay, every single thing then gets routed into a formal way. Because obviously if someone's asking me about how they can, what's for lunch, which could be sometimes a question, or how do I find this piece of information on a website, I would quickly do that. And that would I would consider informal, although I sent them to a formal location. But I think it's the formal and informal is more of an illustrative moment to say, that's just sort of how we see things come in. But the formalized processes for how we pick it up is sort of how we partner with our individuals that bring a concern and get them on the track. But that's just more of, I don't want to get, I want to sort of say that it comes in all ways as well. So the formal informal thing, I think, is tied to a bit of tracking, but then to start to train a community on this is informal to talk about a bus, you know what I mean, pickup line versus actually I'm concerned about a bus route. And so that comes in by email most often, or it comes directly to a school principal or bus driver when they are picking up. So those are all the different ways. So I think that when I say formal and informal, it's sometimes the way it comes in.
I totally agree, but I
Yeah.
think that's where I think we need to name it. And until we name it and create a process for it, like we as a school board should not be getting the emails we get every year at the start of school for bus routes. Like what we don't solve bus routes, but literally our parents don't feel like there's any other way to elevate their concern. And truly, like there isn't, because they're not trying to make a formal complaint about bus routes, but they do want to say like, hey, when this rerouting happened, my whole neighborhood is now left out. So they do want to find, they do need a way to be able to share that concern in a way that they don't feel they want to do something formal. They don't want to have to like email someone about it, but they don't have any other way they feel like they can address it. And so
It's a fair point. And I would say, even if we were to lay out that, I think we would still get emails, right, to many places. And so that's why we get trained to pick it up. And so we scoop it up almost and say, okay, it went to the board. Well, let's redirect that to, our transportation team and sort of, and do more, follow up. So to me, it's about also the follow up that happens and that we're not letting it lag. So fair point. And I would also say sometimes we will still get those emails. I think success does not mean that you have 0 emails. Success means people feel like their issue is getting resolved and that we are working together.
I agree, but I think for what I'm saying is the threshold by which a parent would feel comfortable emailing the school board, I would say that then that must mean there's probably 10 other issues that we're not hearing about, we being the district, because they wouldn't feel comfortable doing that, yet they would have a valid concern that could probably make our system and practice better. That's all.
Got it. Fair point.
Dr. Moore?
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, the idea of putting something on each school website where they could report something. I mean, I go on 2 sides of this. One, for many things, you really want them to take it to the person. If the issue's with your teacher, take it to the teacher and deal with the teacher versus, anonymously reporting issues with your teacher. But on the other hand, there could be benefit in being able to have a way for people to go online and submit a concern that can then be looked into. Right. So, and then you'd also see how many people are even willing to take that kind of an avenue, again, because the minute you start creating a form, sort of, even if you don't put your name on it, starts to create a formal process in a way, or a formal situation. It's a challenge. It will always be a challenge if you get reports that don't have full information or a person's name, because sometimes there's only so far you can go to investigate because
Very
you
true.
don't have enough information.
Yes.
And so if people really want to have their concerns resolved and they don't want to do it directly, they could be reporting it, but they'll need to be putting their name and information on it so that you can do your best work to resolve things.
I agree. I think here will be my suggestion, which is this generalized page of what people should go do and a catch-all form. But in the form, I want to know what step they've already taken along this path. Have you raised this issue to your first point of contact in your school? Who was that? What was the date? Have you raised it? Have you done step 2? Because I think that is the challenge. You end up with a mishmash of concern. And I do wonder, some of the things that come to us directly is because people think I'm going to the top, and they haven't actually gone through the steps of going through trying to resolve it. That's not all people, but I'd say we should just try it. Put a general form, you'll get a sense of actual volume. And if you ask people, well, what step have you already taken? Because that's my hope, is that What we're talking about is I have tried to resolve and I am still unsatisfied. And if that's the case, then it shouldn't be that hard to collect what had previously been done.
So just trying something, I'll think about that and think about what, take this into account. There would be operational and staffing costs to that. So I need to look further into what a solution could be, but also just take stock of, where we currently can just tighten up maybe some clarification as well. That could be an easy step to take for where to direct specific questions. So thank you.
We're gonna nail it this time. Thank you very much. And with that, we move on to legislative matters. Director Gallinger, any updates?
I don't think that I have any updates right now, other than we're still trying to coordinate some meetings with legislators in district. Our focus will be transportation, so hopefully, and I guess I don't know how you want to do this, Superintendent, but at some point we probably need a conversation with the board about the topic that we're going to be talking with our legislators about. So we're all on the same page, because not every board member will be attending one of them. And I will, once I get the date set with everyone, I will reach out to you guys to find a partner to join me. But I defer that to our superintendent to figure out how and what means and mechanism you want that venue to happen.
Yeah, I think I'd say two things. One is we could share whatever collateral we prepare in preparation for that when it's ready, which we can work on and in preparation for those meetings. And once we also set that time, we can quickly get that circulated. And then also, I think future opportunities for work studies or ongoing informal time to sort of make sense of that is also good, as well as paired with even a formal, presentation at board meeting.
I think what we did talk about last agenda planning is that we would schedule a formal topic. So in these next 3 agendas. So I think it may just be about when, did we pick a date?
Well, we targeted it for October 26th.
For the 26th to bring that topic forward.
Work study.
Okay, work study. So we do have that working. Okay, awesome. Anything else? Anything else from any other board members on legislative matters? If not, we will go on to announcements, correspondence. Any additional items to share that have not already been noted on the agenda? Okay, awesome. And then that moves us to calendar and future agenda topics.
Yeah. Oh.
We have a motion.
Oh, to formally, yes,
Yes,
please.
there's a motion.
I was like, we have, but the formal motion.
Yeah,
I
formal.
was like, we just did
What
all
is
that
she
work to
talking
schedule
about?
them. I'm reading it here like, what?
I move the board schedule the 2023-2024 school improvement plan meetings to take place on November 2nd, 2023, December 6th, 2023, and January 17th, 2024, from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. as presented.
Second.
Any discussion?
And presumably those take place here.
Yeah.
Those are all here.
2 points of discussion I have. One, can we ensure that our school board candidates have the opportunity to attend these? Because this is I've never seen us where they're going to cross over a change in board lead, like composition. And so, and for me, at least as a new school board member, these were probably the most important initial meetings that I had, because you got to meet all the building leaders across the district. And so these are really, really important moments. And if Bethany could make sure they understand how important they are. Obviously, the December 6th one was probably going to be easier, since that's the installation board meeting, but so they can plan their lives accordingly. And the second thing is, with that November one coming up really soon, and the amount of data that comes for us in those packets, if those can be sent out to us really soon, to get that information, to start wading through it. Because I don't remember, are we on feeder pattern this year? Not yet. So
Feeder.
Yeah.
there's so much different data. So when if it was a year we're coming by just by grade level, we would just have one district data report to consume. But here, because it's by feeder pattern, we'll have 3 different
Level.
district level data to review plus the set plans. So we'll need a lot of lead time.
Mhm. And hopefully our school board candidates are all listening to our meetings and are listening at this moment,
I'm so sure they are.
that the school improvement plan meetings are very important if they can attend.
And so we're confirmed we will extend that invitation. Yes. I didn't, sorry, hear a response to the second point around
Oh, when we'll get the data.
data readiness.
We can get back to you on that one. Thank
Okay.
you. I heard the request. I'm sorry. I was just taking stock and taking
Okay.
notes and
Just wanna make sure.
I didn't mean to leave that one hanging.
Mhm.
Awesome. Any other? We have
No,
not. I was saying
vote.
any other weird,
Yeah.
that was the discussion.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
We're literally discussing it. Any other points of discussion before we do this? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That one passes as well. Thank you.